We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady. We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football. I like football season, all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson, and we are getting ready to break down the NFC South and the NFC North. If you're watching us live here on YouTube, we've got one more. We have one more draft grade session to get through. That'll be coming out either tomorrow or Monday.
yes.
Got some things to figure out here. I don't want to say we lied to the people, but we might have to push one to Monday.
Yeah, well, things have gone awry this week a little bit. I'm away for the weekend.
So do you think that's the play? We'll do a Monday morning.
It could be. I mean, look, it comes down to whether there's three options, right? Either you need to have it in you to go monologue style for that length of time, and I don't know if that's in you. Two,
Are you challenging me?
No, I'm just saying, look, if you want to go monologue style, it's ambitious. I applaud the idea, but you want to go right in there with like a 90-minute monologue, that's tough.
60. We can do 60.
60. Two, you find somebody else to do the podcast. There's a lot of people away. Or three, we do what you're talking about, which is bump Friday's plan to Monday and roll in.
All right, so TBD.
But
you're going to get more draft grades.
I'm not here, so I don't really care what you do.
You don't care. You're off. You're off to the woods.
Yeah.
And, have fun. Enjoy it. Well-deserved vacation. So we're going to go through the NFC. We've already hit a couple of the divisions. Check them out in podcast land if that's where you are, or on YouTube. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Thanks to everybody for tuning into the PFF draft show last week. Record numbers for us. So it was a lot of fun. Let's get right into it. NFC South and North. So I guess we got to start in the South.
We probably do.
We do.
Remember, though,
I want to start with the Rodgers
before
stuff,
we go anywhere. We are almost there to the $1,000 to charity that's required to get you to rock a fro on this podcast. We are $745, I think, out of 1,000. Go to my Twitter, PFF_Sam. It's the pinned tweet. If we raise $1,000 for charity, A, we'll raise $2,000 because Steve's going to match it, and B, he will have to have a full-on fro during the podcast, which is frankly a win-win for everybody.
It looks like we're going to get there. We'll match the donation. It's to Heritage House, a local faith-based recovery program here in Cincinnati for men fighting addiction.
And thank you to everyone that's already donated.
Yes, thank you to everybody. And so I'm looking at probably like next Thursday when you come back.
Yeah.
It might be an afro show, and then I'm going to have to find Liz for the haircut before I head to vacation.
Okay, you have to do that. Is that related to the afro show? Or
the thing is, I've needed a haircut for a while, but once this fro thing showed up, I can't go cut it right now. I can't cut my hair.
Oh, before the fro.
Yeah, so I need to go fro, get the haircut.
But like, it's not that the fro is going to cause like an acute need for a haircut. It doesn't like ruin it for perpetuity, right? It
ruins it for a couple days. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
It depends on how you look at it. You might think it's already ruined.
No comment.
Anyway, thanks to everybody that's already donated. So check it out, Sam's Twitter account. Let's go. Atlanta Falcons, NFC South review. The Falcons get Kyle Pitts in the first round, 4th overall. Really nice. You end up with Richie Grant in the second round. I thought it was an okay draft overall. It wasn't like they should have gone all defense, but Jalen Mayfield was a bit of a. I mean, where they got him was fine. They wanted Jalen Mayfield, the offensive tackle from Michigan, probably going to come in and step in at left guard. There's some projection to him. Some other people in the draft community liked him even more. But I think Atlanta still comes out of this draft with some massive question marks on defense.
Yeah, which was always likely to be the case when you look at the roster and what they needed. I mean, this was a team that needs defense across the board, which is why I actually like going offense with, Kyle Pitts. It's like, look, nobody could pick at number 4, even independent of the fact that defenders didn't really appear worth the number 4 overall pick. But nobody you could have picked at that spot was going to fix the defense, whereas Kyle Pitts can be this force multiplier to the offense and say, all right, let's take an offense that's already pretty good. Let's push it into the stratosphere of phenomenal, and then we'll attack defense later on and just keep chipping away at that, because that's going to be more of a multi-year project. So I love the fact that I said, they were going to get trapped at number 4. I just didn't see the trade down materializing, and that was going to leave them, quotation marks, stuck with Kyle Pitts. But that's giving you a guy who is a genuine unicorn in terms of potential and capability and what he's able to do. And I've seen some people recently saying, for everybody saying Kyle Pitts is the best tight end prospect and the most freaky athlete ever, do you guys not remember Vernon Davis? Which I think is a good one to bring up, because Vernon Davis back in the day broke the combine, was like a 4.35 or something at his size.
He was also, I forget his exact measurables coming into Maryland. He was a wide receiver recruit.
Yeah.
He was on the recruiting board as a receiver and then bulked up huge at tight end.
And was just this, workout warrior type of physical freak. I think it was 4.35, but had crazy numbers across the board. But the difference, I think, between Vernon Davis and Kyle Pitts is, one, there's a significant difference in length between the two. Vernon Davis just got massive, but Kyle Pitts is well proportioned at whatever he is, 6'6". And then the other difference is, I think Kyle Pitts is just a way more natural receiver. He's so good and so freaky that the fact that he is one of the most natural just pass catchers in this draft at any position is the 7th thing on the list you bring up about him, right? He is able to, in the course of running a route, catch a completely off-target pass and keep on flying like it's nothing. And those are that would be number 1 in terms of a lot of prospects. That would be the thing you're talking about for a lot of prospects. But because Kyle Pitts is 6'6" and runs a 4.4 and can play everywhere, it barely gets a mention. The actual fundamental parts of being good at the position, it barely registers in terms of how good he is.
You want a Vernon Davis breakdown here?
Yeah. What do we got?
In 2006, at 6'3",
yeah,
254. By the way, 6'3" is short for a tight end.
Right. So there's 3 inches between them. There's a lot of length between them in terms of Kyle Pitts had the longest wingspan that's ever been measured. Vernon Davis didn't.
100th percentile 40-yard dash at 4.38. 20-yard and 10-yard, both 98th and 99th percentile.
Yep.
99th percentile bench press with 33.
Yeah.
Vertical, 42.
Yeah.
That's 99th percentile. Broad jump, 97th percentile. 20-yard shuttle, 4.17, 90th percentile. And then his 3-cone was 78th percentile, 7 flat. So he's 97th percentile or better in every workout measure, Vernon Davis, except the 3-cone, and he was still really good there. So
Vernon Davis,
that is probably a good comp as far as unicorn type of deal. And this is a guy that showed up once every 15 years, literally.
Sure, but also I think Vernon Davis had one of the best combines of all time. That's one of the best not even weekends, one of the best performances at the scouting combine of any player ever. But I think there is a difference between the two of them in terms of just how good they were at actually playing their position. And for as freaky an athlete as Vernon Davis was, he didn't really have wide-out skills. You know what I mean? Whereas Kyle Pitts does. He might not be as special an athlete as Vernon Davis, but he's a significantly better player in terms of playing wide receiver and wide receiver skills. So even if you're comparing the two of them, you make a great point that is, it's literally generational, right? 2006 and now is a generation. So it is a generational thing, those two guys. But also, I think even considering Vernon Davis's freaky workout numbers, Kyle Pitts is a better, more unicorn, more rare prospect.
Can we also just say, look, no matter what position you call Kyle Pitts, tight ends usually take a little bit of time to transition to the NFL.
Sure.
Even a Vernon Davis or whoever it might be. Even Rob Gronkowski was unbelievable as a rookie, but he had I have to look up his stats.
There's only been like 2,000-yard receiving tight ends right out of the gate. One of them was Jeremy Shockey, and I forget who the other one was.
Gronk had modest stats. He had good stats, and then really broke out in 2011. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, do you just keep Julio this year? There's a lot of rumors that they're going to trade him and this whole thing. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, you do kind of want to win here in year one. They're not in tank world. You've got Matt Ryan as quarterback for at least the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. I really want to see what Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Kyle Pitts look like. And by the way, Russell Gage was one of the better third wide receivers last year. It is a really good trio. And Hayden Hurst, I didn't think Hayden Hurst was an upgrade over Austin Hooper like some other people did, but he's a nice tight end too. You know, he's a good backup to a Kyle Pitts, or a change of pace to Kyle Pitts. I'm really loving this offense, and I want to see it. I want to see the Falcons, like, they have a playoff caliber offense.
Yeah.
This hasn't changed over the last couple of years, but they have to find a way to just stitch it together defensively, creep back toward average as best they can, whether it's a new scheme or whatever. But I really want to see Pitts and Julio and the whole crew on the field at the same time.
Yeah, I think unless you get a crazy offer for Julio, you keep him.
The question for the Falcons, defensive line, Grady Jarrett's the only guy projected as a starter that graded above 58, and he was an 80. So the defensive line's a big question mark. They didn't address that until round 5, and then the entire defensive backfield is the same thing. Nobody that's coming back graded above 65, and that's Deron Harmon. He's a new addition over at free safety. Richie Grant, nice strong safety type of prospect, to get him in the second round at 40 overall, as I said. And like I said about Jalen Mayfield, you get him in the third round. The one thing I do like about the Falcons with their offensive line, it does seem like they've always had a couple sturdy pieces, and then they're always bringing one in or two in. They had to bring 2 in a couple of years ago with Chris Lindstrom and Caleb McGarry, but now they have veterans. Mayfield will be a new starter potentially at left guard. I guess you got Matt Hennessy starting at center. Drew Dahlman, the 4th round center out of Stanford, also might be competing there. So I think the mid-round options have a chance to contribute, which is nice for the Falcons. But I'm still coming out of this saying I don't really feel anything good.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because of what's there. It's like you have a path to contribute because the players in those positions are not good. So you have a clearer way through to actually being productive, but it's not necessarily a ringing endorsement of the players that you drafted. It's just that you hit a position eventually that has a pretty dire need and can therefore see some playing time.
We gave the Falcons a B overall because I think, as I say, this was good, but there's more to do. There's probably a few better players that they could have gotten there. By the way, the 2 places that they did address corner, Darren Hall at San Diego State and Avery Williams at Boise State. Like we've said about the Cardinals and some other teams, there's a path to the field for those guys because it's A.J. Terrell and a Kendall Sheffield as the projected starters. That spot opposite A.J. Terrell is wide open. So for Hall and for Avery Williams, a good spot for those guys to compete. Let's go to the Carolina Panthers here. They go with J.C. Horn in the first round. And what do we end up with their draft grade here? They got a B-. So we were a little bit lower on their draft. I liked Terrace Marshall.
Yes.
Their 2nd round pick, Brady Christensen. Their 3rd round pick, I think the big question is J.C. Horn at 8 overall. We always talk about scheme fits. On paper, this is not a good one. But sometimes different picks indicate changes in how you're going to play defensively. So explain that, why J.C. Horn on paper is not a good fit for the Panthers.
I mean, if you ask anybody what J.C. Horn is as a prospect, they would tell you he's the best press man cover corner in this draft. So a guy that will get up at the line of scrimmage, jam receivers at the line, and ride them with physical contact throughout the route. But if you ask him to play off coverage or in zones, just the tape isn't as good. He isn't quite as... You got some questions about his movement skills when he's out on an island in space and he doesn't have his hands all over the receiver to be able to kind of give him clues as to what the change of direction is going to be. And you just like his fit in that kind of scheme a lot less than you do a team that plays a ton of press man coverage. So teams like Philadelphia or New England or Miami, you're like, okay, that makes sense. That's a great fit. Team like Carolina, they played like the fewest amount of press man.
Lowest press snaps, 4th highest percentage of zone.
Yeah, so one of 2 things has to change. Either you're expecting J.C. Horn to get significantly better at that, or you I mean, you just interpret it differently. You think he is good at that. Or you are planning on pivoting something in your defense so that J.C. Horn can play a lot more press man, whether that's the entire defense is going to play more press man coverage, or whether it's, that kind of Seattle type of system where you can isolate one corner, almost lock one guy up in man coverage, and then the rest of the coverage shell sort of pivots as one unit elsewhere, right? The Seahawks did that a lot with Richard Sherman during his pump. They would just lock him up one-on-one on that side and forget about everything else, just move everything else away from him. So you can kind of play press man within a zone coverage shell. It's just that most teams don't.
Their trio of corners now is A.J. Boye, who he hasn't been good for a couple of years, but I don't mind taking a shot on him. And then Dante Jackson, who's been solid. I think Dante could play inside, be their nickel, with Horn and Boye being outside.
And I think Dante Jackson has press man skills, particularly if you're going to make him into a slot corner. I think he could function in that kind of defense pretty well. The other spot would be a question mark. Like, can A.J. Boye now?
He's an off player.
Right. Can
He's
he
had
hold
his
up?
Best year with Jacksonville playing
like
that.
Can he hold up as a press man cover corner as the other one of the trio? That I think would be a pretty big question mark.
I like some of their other picks. I mentioned Terrace Marshall, getting him in the second, dropped a little bit because of injury concerns, but big-bodied receiver who's not a lot of times at that size you get a clunky route runner. He's pretty good route runner. He's good at the catch point. I like Terrace Marshall a ton.
He could be a steal. I mean, when you get into round 2 in this draft, there aren't many guys where you could look at them and say they have true number one X receiver skills. They could become, a legitimate number one wide receiver in any offense. Terrace Marshall has that skill set. He could be the one guy from those mid to lower rounds where you say, all right, that guy could come in and be an elite number one receiver. Now, obviously, he slid, basically a full round over where we were expecting him to go because of injuries, and that's always its own question mark. But if he holds up, like if he is physically okay, I mean, that's them getting another first-round caliber wide receiver way lower than that.
And then it feels like my theme here. Here are the other things that this team still needs to do to get better. Trying to skew negative every single time. But the Panthers remain with some questions, have some questions that remain on the offensive line. Left tackle is a choice between Cam Irving, who had a 58 grade last year, has never really graded above 60, and then Greg Little hasn't developed, was drafted as a developmental second rounder a couple years ago, had a 44 grade in limited time last year. So, third rounder Brady Christensen, who's probably Greg Little's age. I don't even know. I got to check it because I think he's about 25 now. BYU getting Brady Christensen at 70 overall. That's about where we would take him. And Christensen, 96th grade last year at BYU. It wasn't the most difficult slate of edge rushers that he's faced over the last couple of years, but he's been incredibly productive. He's one of the keys to this entire draft for the Panthers. If Christensen can actually come in and play left tackle, I'm really liking this draft. I mean, here are the what ifs. J.C. Horn either takes to the system or they adjust it to him. Terrace Marshall is the playmaker that we expect, and all of a sudden it's DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson and Terrace Marshall. They also signed David Moore. That looks really nice. And Brady Christensen comes in and plays left tackle.
Brady Christensen is a full year older than Greg Little.
Older than Greg Little.
Yeah.
So there you go. He's more experienced. He's experienced in life. So Brady Christensen could step in. It doesn't completely solve the offensive line, but Taylor Mouton at right tackle is really good. One of the league's best. The rest of the line, Pat Elflein, Matt Paradis, Dennis Daly, either
do you have any
just
idea?
Haven't performed well either ever or recently.
This is another one of those things, where you're saying, I at least like to be able to see the pattern of what you're trying to attempt, when you're generally building a roster, when you're constructing player acquisition. And the offensive line, I think, is the same thing. Like, can you at least see a pattern of what they're doing, right? And with the Panthers, I have no earthly idea what they're doing. They bring in a couple of guys in free agency immediately. So they bring in Pat Elflein and Cameron Irving in like the first hour of free agency, which means you were prioritizing those players, right? You don't stumble into a value pick in the first hour of free agency. Those were guys you were targeting, and neither of those guys has played well in the NFL. They're also... so in the draft, you get Brady Christensen coming in, okay. Later on, they get Deontay Brown, who is like a monster road grading interior offensive lineman, a guy that's going to be threatening 350 pounds, isn't going to be the best pass blocker in the world, but will like plow a furlough for your running back to run through. But how does that mesh with like a Pat Elflein, who's like an undersized interior offense? Again, what are you doing here? I don't see the pattern between these players you're bringing in.
Throwing a lot and seeing what sticks.
But surely you would throw a lot at like better players than that.
Yeah, I don't know. Deontay Brown, by the way, I mentioned it on the live show really quickly. Didn't give up a sack at Alabama, but as we always talk about here, that's not a critical. It's a nice stat, but it's not a critical factor, so to speak, from PFF standpoint. Deontay Brown has been a very below average pass blocker at Alabama, and I'm just reiterating the point that you do not judge offensive linemen by sacks allowed. It is out of their control. You look at how well they blocked, and he was not a good pass blocker. Makes for good tweets. They go viral, but Deontay Brown, don't look at that 0 sacks allowed and say, wow, what a steal in the 6th round. He's not a good pass blocker.
The last time you called out the social team, they got you back pretty quickly.
I'm not calling out the social team.
It sounds a little bit like
I'm just saying, I'm just explaining the stat that will retweet it, make the social team feel good, but
because they pulled out your little short shuttle and said that's what a 0.0 grade looks like.
It's that's average in our system. Do they even know that? 0 grade?
No, it isn't.
On the plus-minus system,
the old
it
system,
is.
Yeah, not anymore.
0.0, that's rough.
I mean, it was true, but
Tommy Tremble's the other guy to look at. There's the tight end room is not great in Carolina. Tommy Tremble, little athleticism. Even he's more of like an H-back move player. One of the best, some of the best run blocks you'll ever see. A lot of them on the move. As I said, I thought he would be a guy that like a team that runs a fullback a lot. The Patriots, the Shanahan scheme, the Ravens. I thought that they would really covet Tremble because he can line up all over the place and absolutely wreck people. But 3rd round, 83rd overall.
They also they drafted a long snapper from Alabama, Thomas Fletcher.
They got the better long snapper.
Yeah. But did you see the call that they made to the long snapper?
I saw that they were showing it. I didn't see the actual.
The long snapper wasn't aware that he'd been drafted. So Matt Rule calls him up. He's like, hey, so, you ready to go or something? The standard stuff. And he was like, he thought he was just being recruited as like an undrafted thing, where you have your choice.
Yeah.
He was like, I don't know, coach. I'm like weighing up my options, just narrowing it down right now. He's like, no, we just drafted you. Like
you don't have any
you're
options.
Coming to Carolina. He's like, yeah. It's like, I'll walk there right now.
I would have been like, you drafted a long snapper? Are you crazy? Why would you do that?
I wouldn't draft me. What are you doing?
Why you wasted a pick on a long snapper? See, even Thomas Fletcher gets positional value.
I mean, even he was surprised, yeah.
Listen, you show up to the PFF NFL podcast for everything here. Thomas Fletcher, perfect on short snaps. That's field goals and extra points. Perfect. 90 of them last year.
You were out on the Cheeseman, but you're in on Thomas Fletcher.
Yeah, Cheeseman had a couple bad ones in there. But Shrimp Cheeseman?
Shrimp Cheeseman.
And then Fletcher, 93.8% long snap accuracy. That's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
If you're in the 90s, you're there. You're good.
Yeah.
80s, I don't know.
80s is questionable.
Yeah.
That's when you're in cheese territory. So, all right, B- for the Panthers. This is an okay draft, solid draft. New Orleans Saints. I don't think we gave them a good grade. Scrolling down, I'm scrolling. I'm doing it the long way here. Saints, we gave them a C. I was underwhelmed by their draft in general. They drafted 6 times. Peyton Turner, 1st round pick. He is Marcus Davenport-like as far as size and length. I'm going to read I'll read his measurables as well. He's not a complete projection. He did have really good production last year as well.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where there's a 30-pick difference between where we had him on the big board and where he ended up getting selected, 58 to 28. But we were saying this heading into the process that, look, the edge rusher group is chaos this year, and there are going to be teams that have some of these guys that we have, in the middle of the 2nd round. That's going to be their number 1 edge rusher on the board and all these kinds of things. So I think that is a reflection of what we were talking about, that the Saints just valued Peyton Turner higher than we did. And as much as you can say, you can point to reasons why that's not smart, you can also point to things that would back them up and say, all right, this makes sense. So I don't hate the Peyton Turner pick. I think a lot of people were talking about him as a 1st rounder. And because this year more than any other, like that group of edge rushers was just like madness in terms of trying to rank those guys. So I don't think you can hate on the Saints for that particular pick. Certainly relative to other years where you might be more critical.
6'6", That's 92nd percentile. 6'6", 268. He's got 35+ inch arm length. That's 96th percentile. 95th percentile. Hands. Here's the kicker, though. 3-cone, 6.7.
Wow.
That's 99th percentile. Now, we talked about, now at 6'6", 268, we're not adjusting for size with this. This is like every edge rusher that ran a 3-cone historically.
That's a 98th percentile, even going up against those 220-pound edge rushers that pop up every now and again and should be, should have freaky speed.
Right. And so that combination is incredible. Was at the Senior Bowl, did some nice things there. So he's got the length and freaky change of direction. We talked about Kwity Paye, who didn't run a 3-cone this time, but he's got a 6'5", under his belt and historically, which is ridiculous.
I would sit on that as well if I had one of those.
That's you've got it.
Don't run one ever again. That's the one you use.
By the way, just for perspective, I was looking through, say, like in high school, you go to all these camps. You go to a lot of camps, and you might do these workouts 4, 5, 6 times in an off season. Whereas in the NFL, you do it once or twice, right? Just to understand how these things fluctuate. I was looking at a high school kid's breakdown the other day. His 40s ranged from like 4.38 to 4.52.
Yeah.
In an off season. His 3-cone ranged from say 6.8 to 7.1. I mean, so there are ranges for these things. It's not completely set in stone. All you're doing, it's a snapshot in time and a range that you're getting into.
Like, just think about what that is. Like, of course they fluctuate by that level.
There's different stopwatches.
There's pretty much that degree of margin of error in the system, just in terms of operating a freaking stopwatch. And B, you're talking about like a 1/10 of a second. Of course you're going to fluctuate in your running time over 40 yards by a 1/10 of a second every now and again when you're doing them.
So with Turner, so the thing is, I'm going to talk about this a little bit with Joe Tryon, when we get to the Bucs too. One of the best ways that you can use PFF grades is on the defensive line. It is one of the most translatable, some of the most translatable numbers that we have are grades. Pass rush grade and run defense grade. They are very stable from college to the NFL. And by the way, stable doesn't mean 100%. It just means it's, very predictive. It's far more predictive, of course, than sack totals or tackles or anything like that. And Peyton Turner had a really nice 2020, small sample size, but his production's solid. We're talking compared to recent NFL prospects, slightly above average, a little above average compared to these recent NFL prospects as far as pass rush grade, run defense grade has been really good. So it's not like we're talking about a completely unproductive project here. So I think the Turner pick could be fine. Mm-hmm. He's a solid player with freak tools and athleticism, and he steps in and he turns a strength into a strength on this New Orleans defensive line. We're talking about a line that has Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport, and Turner has a chance to maybe step in and replace Trey Hendrickson, who just hit free agency.
It maintains a strength. I mean, it prevents potential erosion of that group.
The rest of the picks, Pete Werner drafted a little bit higher than we would have said, second-round linebacker out of Ohio State. And then Paulson Adebo, the Stanford cornerback, or Adebo. I think he's the most important player here for the Saints. I keep coming back to, what does the current depth chart look like? What are the current needs? The Saints came into this thing, if you're going to make a play, wide receiver and corner. Those are the things in 2021 where they need to be good. They just have to be. You lost Emmanuel Sanders and you lost Janoris Jenkins. And you don't go in and just fill the needs. But it's a question mark, man. Like, their secondary was a strength last year too. Patrick Robinson is better in the slot. Marshawn Lattimore's on one side. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson plays more in the slot in a hybrid role. Who's that other outside corner? Adebo has a chance to be that guy, but he's a third-rounder, 76th overall pick. But there's a path to the field for him. If he somehow steps in and he's solid, it's a steal and a kind of a necessary one for the Saints to compete.
And there were people that loved that guy. Like, we had him ranked as the 18th best corner in the draft, but there were players that had him evaluators that had him top 5 amongst cornerbacks. The sort of, when we were looking at who could sneak into the first round, when we were talking about Eric Stokes and the other Georgia corner, but there were people that had Paulson Adebo as that guy, the guy that could sneak into the first round as somebody that does have the talent, 24 pass breakups in 2 seasons. So it's interesting. He was drafted just low enough where you're like, well, you can't really rely on him, but just high enough where he can show something and get himself on the field. He's in that weird sort of gray area of team commitment, kind of like Cameron Dantzler a year ago. Just high enough where you're like, okay, Dancer could make this team and do some damage. He's got talent. And then just low enough where you're like, well, you're not relying on it. Like, it's probably not happening. But if he shows well, the team could buy in.
I mean, the same way I say, okay, trust our defensive line grades more than others. The coverage stuff does tend to fluctuate a little bit. Those guys are harder to predict, and it's not just PFF. When you look historically at hit rate, and we did have an astute listener put together a lot of hit rate stuff just before the draft. I didn't have a chance to really look at it, and I forget who it is. I apologize, but he tweeted at us, Sam. I glanced at it, and at a glance, you just saw cornerback is really low as far as NFL hit rate. It is a difficult position to project. So a best case scenario for the Saints, there are third round corners that can contribute because, again, projections are all over the place, and college production doesn't always translate directly to the NFL. He's 6'1", 198, Adebo, 4'5", 40, above average generally from a measurable standpoint, and then solid college production, only 2 years, 2018 and 19. So that is, to me, he's just one of the bigger wild cards in the entire draft. You mentioned all the forced incompletions. He's got a ton, 30, and one of the highest rates per target. So Adebo, he could be a good player. I think there's he's just like the guy I'm going to be watching in this class. And I imagine in the Saints draft room, they're excited getting a guy that you said people really liked. He was probably a top 40 player on the Saints board.
Yeah, I would imagine so. They also drafted Ian Book, which is a weird one, in the 4th round.
That's where I thought they wasted a pick.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's way worse than the Davis Mills pick, I think.
I mean, well, you made the same point, essentially. Renner said they lit that pick on fire, and you've essentially just made the same point for Ian Book.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Book is a guy that has he's not the most accurate quarterback. He doesn't have great tools, and he holds the ball way too long in the pocket. Yeah. He's athletic. That's his one really good trait is athleticism and scrambling ability.
Maybe he can be Taysom Hill to Taysom Hill's Taysom Hill.
But there you go.
When you're talking about the sort of the qualities that you need to be a viable NFL quarterback, not even a good one, the thing that we talked about the sliders, right? The trait sliders that Drew Brees was able to, if your arm is going to go down and your slider for arm strength is going to slide all the way towards the bottom, the only way you're viable in the NFL is if the other things are right up at the top, accuracy and anticipation and being able to get rid of the ball quickly. And Brees was able to play still at a really high level because that was what he was towards the end. The arm strength fell off a cliff, but the other stuff was rooted like up at the 90 whatever percentile. Ian Book is a guy where the arm strength is down, the anticipation is down, and the accuracy is down. Like at that point, how can you succeed in the NFL? Like, you're not good at any of the things that are necessary to be a viable NFL quarterback. It's not that you need all three of them, but one of them has to be good, and none of them are.
Just the way you describe that too, the spectrum of players is like Alex Smith, who was a former #1 overall pick, and we know him as a conservative, throw the ball underneath type of guy, but he had a good enough arm. He had a good
enough arm and accurate enough.
He was extremely accurate. He also played a little bit slower than you would have liked at times, right? Alex Smith. There were times
that slider would have been down.
Sacks, right?
Anticipation wasn't great. Though that slider would have been down.
But when he threw it, it was accurate, right?
The other two would have been reasonably high.
Then you have Cody Kessler, below average NFL arm.
Yep, down.
And then also had that just slow processing in the pocket.
Was accurate.
Dude, you can't do that. You just can't be that slow in the pocket without the tools.
So was accurate, but
extremely accurate.
Processing, anticipation, and arm strength are down. So 2 of his 3 sliders were down.
Right.
2 of Alex Smith's 3 were up.
Here.
That's my point all along.
And Ian Book is low on everything.
To me, it's essentially a 3-slider system, right? And if 2 of your 3 sliders is up, you can succeed in the NFL. If 2 of the 3 are down, you're toast. And Book, 3 of the 3 are down. So I can't even envisage a way that he succeeds unless it is by playing Taysom Hill.
So yeah, I think I didn't love the Book pick. I just think the Saints, it's not Drew Brees isn't there anymore, and not to completely overrate 1 year of what we saw between New England and Tom Brady and the whole thing. But if we want to, we could easily say, here's the value of having an elite quarterback, by the way. He left one place and they they're no longer a playoff team. He goes to another place and they're a Super Bowl champion. Drew Brees raises that floor of your team. He's not there anymore. So I don't think you can afford an Ian Book pick in the 4th. Unless, I mean, I'm all for drafting quarterbacks. There's always a chance that they're great. I'm just not seeing it with him.
That's the thing, right? It's not even that, spending a pick on a quarterback in the 4th round when you've got that kind of chaos of Tamus as your starter was a bad pick. It's that if you're going to do that, at least show me how that guy could be a starter somewhere, right? If they had taken a swing at whoever where you're like, okay, go back to the sliders. I can see 2 of those 3 sliders are good enough that we can work with that in the NFL level. But with Book, it's like, all right, you pick this guy in the 4th round, and I just cannot see how he could work out as an NFL quarterback. Now, look, again, this is not an exact science, right? It's still a massively it's still a system massively subject to who the hell knows what's going on here. There are quarterbacks that nobody ever saw panning out who work out and are good players. But so, maybe Ian Book is that guy. Maybe we'll be looking at this in a few years' time and trying to figure out what the hell we missed on Ian Book because he's become a good NFL quarterback. But when you look at that broad strokes way of doing it, this 3-slider system of accuracy, anticipation and decision-making, and arm strength, all 3 of those are bad for him, at which point there's not an awful lot left for him to be really good at in order to offset that stuff.
So I think, look at the Saints draft. We gave him a C. I honestly would be a little bit higher on this because I see a path to success for Peyton Turner in the 1st round, and I see a path for Adebo. I mean, he's got good production in a limited sample size for us. Moves all right, good size. I think he's the wild card of this draft, and he might have an opportunity to contribute right away as a rookie. Tampa Bay Bucks, as we've said many times, a team that's bringing back. They're 2 deep. They're 3 deep. They're bringing back everybody from the Super Bowl team. So they were in a very different position from every other team. So it's like, do you get guys that are going to help add some depth this year, draft for the future? They have a combination of all that stuff. Joe Tryon, same thing as Peyton Turner. Decent production, bit of a projection. They get him at the 1st and also drafted a little bit higher than we would have said. I love the Kyle Trask pick in the 2nd round as a developmental quarterback. You get him at the end of the 2nd round. I love that. Yeah. And good for Kyle Trask. And then they add interior offensive line depth with Robert Hainsey, who's going to transition from tackle maybe to center, maybe guard at the NFL level. But either way, that is one of those worst-case scenarios for the Bucs.
Well, more to the point,
when
just
guards get hurt.
Cover all 5 positions almost.
He can.
Like, I think one thing that they may have learned from last year is that when you lose an offensive lineman, the last thing you want to do is start shuffling the entire offensive line in order to patch up the one guy that went down, because now you're making 2 or 3 spots worse. And that was what Tampa Bay did earlier in the season, and it almost derailed the whole thing. Remember when Ali Marpet went down, they moved Ryan Jensen from center to guard, and everything started to collapse, right? I think that Hainsey is the guy that potentially prevents them needing to do that again. If some guy goes down, Hainsey comes in, regardless of what the spot is. And okay, maybe he's not good, but at least you maintain the other 4 guys. So the 4 of your 5 offensive line are good, and you figure out how to patch up the Hainsey issue if he plays badly.
Then you've got your guy, Jalen Darden.
Yes.
A guy that can play in the slot. And as loaded as the Bucs are, at receiver, at tight end, Darden actually brings something different from what they have at receiver, right? I mean, as far as a slot first, route runner, catch the ball, create after the catch a little bit. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the 3rd wide receiver or starter. No. Reminder, Mike Evans is there. Chris Godwin's there. Antonio Brown's there. Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, all these guys.
Yep.
But like Antonio Brown and Godwin have done a lot of the work in the slot, especially Godwin. And he's a different type of player than even a Jalen Darden, who comes in and could see some snaps this year.
I quietly love this draft. They were in a position where they didn't have holes anywhere. So the question is, well, what do you do with that? Do you draft for depth everywhere and just plug in a guy that would be the bottom guy on the depth chart? Do you take guys that are like redshirt players and you hope can develop into something special in the future? I think the Bucs have basically gone a mix of everything. They've taken some guys like Joe Tryon, who they think are projects and longer-term answers, and, a player they can develop for the future. Same with Kyle Trask. It's like this Brady thing, though, all evidence to the contrary, is not going to last forever. At some point, we're going to need a quarterback of the future, and I do think that Trask has a lot of good developmental traits. Remember, this guy has barely played. Now, it turns out when you look at it in terms of dropbacks, he's played a lot more than somebody like Trey Lance. Kyle Trask attempted more passes last season than Trey Lance has since the start of his high school career, which is slightly terrifying if you're a 49ers fan. But Trask has basically played 2 seasons of football. Guy didn't start in high school, was a backup to De'Ara King, didn't start at the start of his college career either, backup to Felipe Franks, then gets the starting gig. First season went okay, second season was fantastic. So I think you have to look at Trask and think, all right, just because of some of the things he's doing in terms of mistakes, turnover where he plays, those kinds of things, they're a product of the fact that he hasn't played much. And he isn't as good as some other quarterbacks at just understanding everything he needs to read on a given play and avoiding the error during the process, right? But I think you can expect him to get better at that because he is so young at playing the position. So I think that's a great pick for long term. And then a guy like Hainsey, as we just said, comes in, gives you a depth player, avoids a potential disaster when injuries strike. And then Darden does much the same thing at wide receiver, albeit a guy that probably features even less if everybody stays healthy. Darden has a skill set that can come in, be a speed receiver down the field, be a slot guy only, make some plays after the catch. To me, the skill set that he has it's almost a replacement for, Jaden Mickens that they had last year. And, you look at that and you say, well, Jaden Mickens was basically a non-factor in this team. But remember there was like one game where Jaden Mickens got like 7 targets by halftime?
The Bucs had a bunch of injuries at receiver at various times. Antonio Brown didn't show up till late. Godwin missed some time. Evans missed a little bit of time. So that's where the depth really kicked in. And, yeah, Darden was catching passes.
Jaden Mickens had 9 targets on the season, and 7 of them came in one game against the Giants. So I think every now and again, whether it's injuries, whether it's just what the defense is trying to take away, you're going to run into a game where all of a sudden Jalen Darden is getting 5 targets and making a couple of plays here and there.
Yeah, and then, the other thing you could say is, okay, there's a future-looking aspect to all of this stuff, right? So Chris Godwin is a free agent again at the end of the season because he was franchise tagged. Can Jalen Darden step in and be the slot receiver in a year? Alex Kappa, the starting right guard, is a free agent at the end of the season. Will Robert Hainsey step in and be the right guard next year? Joe Tryon, is he a replacement down the road for Jason Pierre-Paul, right? I mean, so all of these players have a path to just add depth this year and then eventually maybe replace some of the stars that are currently on the team. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. I like the Bucs draft. I think they did well. I think they probably could have gotten Joe Tryon's a bit of a not a reach, but you're trying to hit a home run there with a guy that supposedly has gotten all bulked up after the opt-out last year and has all the tools, just hasn't shown it on the field yet. You're getting that at 32, so there's some risk there for sure. It's
probably not the risk I would have taken even at that position, but again, the edge group is chaos. They don't need him to play right away. I get why they did it. Bucs also had Mr. Irrelevant this year.
They did. I predicted it. Grant Stewart predicted it on the air.
You did. You predicted it after reading it from the tracker.
Yeah, people don't know that.
I mean, most people knew that. Austin didn't know that.
Austin did not know on air. It was late on Saturday.
Yes.
It was hour 8 of 8 hours.
A lot of hours of TV. It happened
on live TV. Quick break to tell you about our friends over at Sweat Taylor. They outfitted us for the entire PFF NFL draft show. They were just comfortable, man. It was, good-looking stuff that's comfortable. It's the newest sponsor of the PFF NFL podcast. It's Sweat Taylor, a premium menswear brand that is defining a new kind of casual. From jackets and pants to joggers and hoodies, Sweat Taylor's designs are made to seamlessly fit into your life, moving from runway to office, office to drinks, and drinks to wherever the night takes you. I imagine all of our friends are going to be out, running around Vegas with Sweat Taylor this entire weekend.
Yeah.
I imagine that's what's going to be happening.
Half the department is in Vegas.
They specialize in athleisure wear for men. Pieces are designed with comfort and versatility in mind for every day. Use promo code PFF-SWEAT, that's S-W-E-T, for 25% off. That's PFF-SWET for 25% off your order at sweattailor.com. All right, we're going to the NFC North. Let's start with the Chicago Bears. We're going alphabetically here. We won't get to the Packers yet, right? Chicago, Green Bay, Minnesota. No, Detroit. Chicago, Detroit. Got it. It's my preparation. It's all in my head. Bears win the draft here?
Did they win the draft? They had a very, very good draft. I don't know if you can say they won it. The only downside to Chicago's draft is that it was effectively, 2 players long. at the point where like they gave up a lot to have to make those moves, and then didn't have a pick until the 5th round. And at the 5th round and beyond, everything is kind of, it's a crapshoot. Now, that being said, they got a guy in the 6th round, Khalil Herbert, who got an elite grade from us, was a pick that was, they picked him at number 217. He was the number 91 overall player on our board, so that was an elite pick, but you can't really count on those guys to contribute right away. But this is all about those first 2 picks. Obviously, Justin Fields was their big splash. You've been calling for it all season.
This is the splash.
It looked depressing when it was Andy Dalton. Now they did it. They got Justin Fields. They made it happen. They went and got him. They stopped his slide. Pick number 11. It's not the biggest slide in the world, but they got the quarterback of the future. And now they just need to be right again, because the last time they did this, it was Mitchell Trubisky, and we all know how that went. So, look, on paper, you have to love it. Fields, I get why he slid. I get that there's things to be frightened of on his tape. But ultimately, I think you should probably come down to, even with those things, he had 3 straight seasons of 90-plus PFF grading. He's got a great arm. He's incredibly athletic. He's incredibly accurate. Like, even with that as a problem, it's hard to see it being a crippling problem, because it hasn't been yet against elite teams. So I think it's the right move for them to make. And then I really love that they went back and in the 2nd round grabbed Tevin Jenkins, because that offensive line was not in great shape. And again, like, if you're going to limit the degree to which Justin Fields' negatives are negatives, an offensive line is the first place to start.
I'm really starting to lean on this Ryan Tannehill comp for Justin Fields in talking about range of outcomes and sliders and the whole thing. We've broken this down on the podcast before, but I imagine we have a whole bunch of excited Bears fans, and I just want to make sure that all the options are out there, and think this is where I think Justin Fields can land. I'm excited about him. I think he's the most accurate passer in our charting, 5+ yard passes. So anything down the field, which is fantastic. There's a lot of Tannehill there. When Tannehill throws the ball, it looks really pretty. For most of his career, though, there's always those plays where it's like, 3rd down sack. Why are you taking this? Why are you holding on the ball too long?
Yeah.
And Fields has a lot of that on tape. Now, as I've mentioned before, only 18 turnover-worthy plays, too, for Fields. That's
great.
Better. That's better than Tannehill.
Yes.
So that puts him in – that's how Russell Wilson plays. That's how Aaron Rodgers plays. Guys who don't turn it over, but they take a lot of sacks.
And Wilson was the player that he reminded me of when I watched him play. I know Anthony Tresh labeled him as like a jumbo Russell Wilson. I can see that. When you watch him play, it does remind me of Russell Wilson and a bigger version. Now, obviously, Russell Wilson has set an incredibly high bar to be reaching, and you might be more accurate in terms of to be fair, the last couple of years they've been in a similar place. But generally, the baseline of Ryan Tannehill might be a more realistic target for him than the baseline of Russell Wilson. But I think stylistically, these are the players to be looking at, right? Guys that are really good, but have a tendency to annoy the crap out of you with some of the negatives that they have. Not because they turn the ball over like crazy, like Jameis Winston, but because they're consistently taking slightly smaller negative plays.
I think Dan Orlovsky took way too much crap for his Justin Fields comments.
You do.
I do. I think Dan says some, we want to have him on the show, and we're gonna challenge him on some of the things he said through the years. But I think the Field stuff, he was reporting what a lot of people around the NFL believe. Most of it, right? The processing deal and all that stuff. Is that not what the NFL believes?
The problem,
a lot of people.
The problem to me with Dan Orlovsky's comments is that when they blew up and it was like, "Oh, Dan, what have you done?" He immediately came out and then said, "Oh, I just went and texted a bunch of other people and they've like refuted everything that the first guy told me," right? You have to know.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. You have to, and that doesn't matter. Like, the point is, the people that would defend the comments would be like, he's just reporting what he's heard, and that's perfectly accurate. That's what his job is. Now, I don't know that it is what his job is. He's an analyst, not a reporter.
That's true.
But anyway, the point is that it was really easy for him to corroborate or otherwise the information. He had a bunch of other people he could ask, including people that like work directly with Justin Fields and have that knowledge. And as soon as he did that, he came up with the other side of the story. And my point is, you have to know how loaded those comments are in this world of latent racism when it comes to black quarterbacks versus white quarterbacks and the crap that they have to deal with and navigate and the stuff that's always thrown in their direction compared with white quarterbacks. You have to know how triggering those comments are going to be. So if you're going to relay them, even if they're not your thoughts, at the very minimum, you have to have checked that out first and be like, okay, I'm going to tell you what I've heard, and I'm also going to tell you that I've only heard it from like one guy, right? And everybody else says the opposite, but this might be why. I think he just didn't do that part of it. He just jumped. He just went, I've heard this, and this is why he's falling, without checking it, without going, let me just be clear, I've also heard other people say the exact opposite, so who the hell knows?
Well, let's just be clear on, we've cited here.
Should also be clear what he actually said, just because there's people I'm sure that don't have any idea.
What exactly did he say? Because maybe I'm missing part of it. Because
remember.
the part, because not to get like the headline-driven stuff,
he said he'd heard that Justin Fields wasn't necessarily the hardest worker in the room, not the first guy in the building, the last one out.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I take this back. I don't know anything about that.
And that there was questions about like whether he wanted to be great or something.
Okay, like, that's my fault for even, because I'm only given that takeaway of like the processing thing is the thing that keeps coming up, right? And
that's the thing that we've been pointing out is like the actual negative.
I take back what I said about Dan, because I forgot about those parts of the comments.
To me,
I just want to say we've listed the strengths and weaknesses of all these guys.
Yes.
And that's the one that the more I talk in NFL circles too also does come up. It's the processing
right, that's
aspect.
real.
But people get offended by that as well.
That's real, and I think, well, the problem is I think it was never conveyed accurately by people that were dumping all over Justin Fields and his stock, right? I think that's the thing that is his, A, I think it's his biggest negative. B, I think it is the thing that scared teams, right? So the 49ers, if you're looking between those three quarterbacks, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields, Fields is the guy with that flaw. And I think that's a flaw that NFL teams can convince themselves is a terrifying prospect. They will look at...
And that's what's happened.
Right.
People are terrified of, man, I wish he got rid of the ball a little bit quicker.
They will look at Trey Lance and they will say, that dude has only attempted 400 passes in his life. I can fix accuracy. Look, I can see what he's doing wrong with his feet. I can see what he's doing wrong with his hips. You give me a couple of months with that dude, I'll get him throwing the ball as one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think they look at Fields' issues in terms of holding onto the ball too long and sort of tightening up. I don't think they can fix that. Right. I think they think that is an inherent issue with a quarterback. And Mac Jones doesn't have it,
right,
and Trey Lance doesn't have it, and Trey Lance's issue they think they can fix. With Fields, it's a scarier problem, and I think that's why before the draft I was saying if one of these guys is going to slide, it would be Fields. Now, Jones slid as well, so it's not like I was right. But I think there's a real reason that people were scared of Justin Fields. But what I think happened is...
Fields also dropped compared to where his tools and accuracy and
athleticism
should put him.
He dropped completely. But what I think the problem is that nobody really... Either people weren't getting the information about what it was teams were scared of, or they were just filling in the blanks themselves. So it was like, the NFL is souring on Justin Fields, and I don't really know why, but here's what we think, right? Lazy or doesn't, whatever.
No, I disagree with all
epilepsy.
those. I don't know anything about
all
any
of the stuff that was coming out, right? Yeah. It was ridiculous.
Right.
And I don't know whether that was being fed out there by teams that wanted him to slide, or whether that was just like, I know he's sliding, let's have a look at his tape and let's see what I don't like. And that's what they were throwing out there.
I do think, I said this before too, Fields is an incredible prospect.
Yeah.
Teams wanted him to slide. I mean, Trey Lance wasn't getting attacked the same way. No one else
Fields
was
the only guy that got crapped on to the degree.
Right, so I don't think it was look, all I'm saying is I think it was a teams wanted Justin Fields thing.
But
that's why negative stuff came out.
Maybe. I can also see that it was just the people that knew he was sliding didn't know why he was sliding, and they tried to fill in the blanks themselves, and that's where you got craziness like that come from.
So if you're a Bears fan, Justin Fields, the good, doesn't turn it over. The bad and accurate arm talent to make every throw in athleticism. The bad is holding onto the ball. Over 3 seconds per play. Sack rate close to 30% when he's pressured. That is Tannehill, Mariota type of range. Those guys, that doesn't change. That's very consistent.
And those are two slightly different things, right? One, he generally trends towards holding onto the ball too long. And two, when things start to come at him, he locks up even more. So when he's under pressure, his sack rate is through the roof. When he's blitzed, he takes even longer to deal with it than when he isn't blitzed. Like, there's this trait that when things when the shells start flying around him, that's when Justin Fields starts to lock up and trend even more towards holding onto the ball too long, which is already an issue.
And the thing I said when I was watching Justin Fields, I got Carson Wentz in college vibes, because Wentz would lock up and get stuck in the pocket and all that stuff. But even though coaches get scared by that, I've seen it get better. I've seen Wentz forget Wentz last year, but Wentz has played much faster in the NFL than he did in college.
Yeah.
I've mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo having a slow time transitioning in New England's offense. Now, this would pop up every now and again. There were definitely times he took unnecessary sacks, Garoppolo, but for the most part, plays pretty fast. So I've seen teams, I do feel like the coaching staff, the system, receivers help you play faster.
Sure.
So I could see the path to success for Fields.
And also, with Rodgers and Russell Wilson, there's also evidence that it's not necessary. You can play at an elite level even with that being your biggest flaw.
You can. You absolutely can. So that's why, again, you look at this spectrum of players that take care of the ball, probably take too many sacks, and have those tools. It's Rodgers and Russell Wilson in the elite group. It's Ryan Tannehill in that tier. And if this becomes a major issue, then you're in that Jacoby Brissett, Tyrod Taylor, not Cody Kessler. Cody Kessler is the same thing with just bad tools.
Yeah.
But again, guys that hold the ball, take too many sacks. Mariota is probably in that mid-tier as well, despite the fact that he's a backup right now. So, look, I think I'm just excited for the Bears because if they came, no offense to Andy Dalton, but you knew that they had to make a play. They came away with the quarterback, a guy that many thought was the potential number 1 pick, or number 2 pick coming into the draft. So good for the Bears, and good for this.
The Red Rifle got Mike Glennon, right? Come in, sign the starter deal.
By another Ohio State
2 months later, it's like, by the way, no, we just drafted your replacement. See ya.
By Ohio State's own Joe Burrow, and then by Ohio State's own Justin Fields, or Georgia's own, if I'm doing it that way. Both transfers. So they get Tevin Jenkins on the turn as well. They just released Charles Leno. He's not exactly the epitome of the creep back toward average left tackle. Charles Leno.
Why did they do that? Why did they get rid of Charles Leno?
I don't know.
I liked Tevin Jenkins when I was like, all right, Charles Leno's there. Tevin Jenkins can come in and be a right tackle.
But maybe they're in the Russell Okung sweepstakes.
It's Russell now?
I'm on to Russell.
Yeah, okay.
And then Eric Fisher after that.
Is Russell less attainable now that Bitcoin has gone up? Like, is that more of a problem now than it was?
We need a whole episode. Somebody suggested I should just get Russell on to discuss the
Doge.
The benefits of Bitcoin and being paid in Bitcoin.
Are we through the roof on Doge? Is it still going up?
Are you not going to have to pay taxes on Bitcoin, like if you're getting paid in it?
Pretty sure you do. Okay.
I don't understand the benefit of getting paid in crypto.
Well, the whole thing is they're not like that.
Because clearly you can just.
But this is the thing, right?
Crypto.
You can't. They're not like paying him in crypto. It's not that like you are getting paid in like 0. whatever Bitcoin per what. That's not how it's doing. They're paying him like an agreed upon amount in dollars, and then they're just exchanging it into Bitcoin and giving him the Bitcoin equivalent.
Surely you could do that on your own.
Anybody could do that. It's a complete, like, the whole thing is crap. I don't understand why it's become this like talking point.
Now, if you're getting paid in Doge back in January.
Yeah. Now you'd be living the good life.
Living the real good life. Anyway, Charles Leno, incredible career, really. 7th round pick who's been just a solid left tackle. He's on the market now. Tevin Jenkins has played a little left tackle to Oklahoma State, mostly a right tackle, though. He wasn't the cleanest pass protector. He's a great run blocker. He's solid pass protector. But, yeah, I think you want more depth rather than less depth on the offensive line. So from a draft standpoint, it's a good pick. And, you mentioned Khalil Herbert later in the draft. So a lot of good things for the Bears here, with the biggest one obviously being Justin Fields.
Yeah, Thomas Graham as well was another player that we gave an elite pick to. A guy, again, 228. They got him, and he was the number 76 player on our board. So they got a couple of guys late in the draft, even with those sort of throwaway picks that you think have a real chance to make an impact on this team.
All right, let's go to the Detroit Lions. No mentioning ankle biting here.
It's kneecap biting.
Kneecap biting. But I love
ankle biting is a negative. That's a pejorative. You don't want to be an ankle biter. It's a small child. Kneecap biting is where it's at.
Is that what they got here?
Kneecap biters
in Penei Sewell and Love Aleem McNeil, Levi Onwuzurike.
It's funny. I'm torn on this draft a little bit. I like the players they've got, and they've attacked the trenches in a major way. So data right now essentially says that you want to build a team from the outside in, right? Conventional wisdom says you want to build it the inside out. You get yourself linemen, and then you find cornerbacks and wide receivers after the fact, and that's how you build a team. Data now says that, look, the perimeter players are the more important ones. You get those first. Those are the ones you want to be planning the resources into, and then you just creep back toward average in the offensive line, right? So they have built this thing with an old school mentality. We get Penei Sewell with our first pick. We get a pair of defensive interior monsters in the second and third rounds. That's where we're building, and we'll figure out the rest later on. But so, like, in a way, you look at that and you're like, okay, everything nice we said about Dan Campbell. Hey, he's been learning at the feet of Sean Payton. Maybe he's actually really enlightened as how to do all this sort of stuff. And then he rolls in here and just give me all the offensive linemen. So they're building this sort of using an old school mentality, and usually that doesn't go well. But the Lions were such a freaking mess that I honestly don't think there's a wrong way of doing it. You know what I mean?
But they needed everything.
That's what I mean, right? So they're such a mess, they need everything, at which point I don't care what order you do it in, right?
Here's the other argument, too, I think, in their favor. First off, Penei Sewell, I think, that's a no-brainer. He's an awesome player that's going to solidify. He's been practicing right tackle. He's going to step in at right tackle. If they lose Taylor Decker in the future, he can move to the left side. Getting the back-to-back interior defensive lineman, again, is Levi Onwuzurike and then Aleem McNeil. McNeil we had higher on our draft board, 320 pounds, moves incredibly. He was an outfielder in high school. We saw those highlights on the draft show. So I love him. Onwuzurike is a bit more of a projection, but I don't know if that was by design or just kind of how the board fell.
Right.
The point of adding receivers and corners later, though, is I think the Lions just have so much time to build. They still don't necessarily have their long-term quarterback. So maybe the plan is, yeah, we're building the trenches and the whole thing, but a year from now and 2 years from now, that's when we're getting QB and receiver and corner, and we'll have them longer from a contract standpoint and everything.
They can't fix it all in one offseason. So it doesn't really matter what order you do it in. Like, as long as you understand the relative importance of receiver and cornerback, and you aren't simply trying to build a team that would crush 1985 but not, 2020 whatever, that's fine. So I'm kind of torn between, does this draft represent like a real ethos of what they're trying to do, right? We believe in smash mouth football and old school and pound the rock and all those ridiculous cliches.
I hope not.
Or does it simply represent, hey, we've got to attack all of this right now, and the big guys is where the board fell, so let's roll with the big guys right now.
So it's really TBD.
Yes.
We can only judge the players.
So I like the players is my overall point. I'm just concerned, or at least we need to be aware that this could be emblematic of this Dan Campbell old school,
picks
kneecap biting.
Picks 101.
Melifonwu.
I keep losing myself here. He was in the third, though, right?
He was in the third. Yes.
Yeah. So the third round pick, Afatu Melifonwu, and fourth round pick, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Also good spots for both of those guys. Melifonwu, freak athlete, tons of size at corner. So that also fills, a major need because, they drafted Jeffrey Okudah last year. He wasn't great. Now we've got Amani Oruwariye and Afatu Melifonwu in the same secondary, which is beautiful.
And Okudah.
And Okudah. I'm just saying they have long names. So we've got some depth there at outside corner. That was much needed. Amon-Ra St. Brown, well worth taking a shot on a bigger receiver again compared to some of the others in this class. He's got pretty good ball skills. So, it's a good, solid overall draft for the Lions. What do we give them?
It is. I like the draft. I think if you look at just the players they've got, I really like the collection of talented players that they've assembled. As I said, it's not even like it's almost independent of the draft. It's like, just does this mean that this is what Dan Campbell values, or is this simply the order that they chose to attack them in? Because one of those, I think, is not a problem. The other one might be.
We went A- for the Lions. By the way, we went A+ for the Bears because they did get the number 3 quarterback on our draft board in Justin Fields, and it was very necessary for those Bears. So, it was a good, solid draft for the Lions. I mean, I love Penei Sewell. Can't wait to watch him play football. Elite second-level run blocker. He's got some power. Highest graded season we've ever seen for a true freshman. Highest graded season we've ever seen for a true sophomore. Sat out 2020. So Lions fans should absolutely be excited about Penei.
Yeah.
And I think the Lions, they also, don't forget, have multiple first-rounders coming up because of the Matthew Stafford trade. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be fascinating, as always. The draft. The rebuild here in Detroit and how they're going to structure this thing. All right, let's go to Green Bay. The Packers. We've touched on the Aaron Rodgers stuff a little bit. Ultimately, do we think he is going to be back with the Packers?
Doesn't sound like it. Brett Favre has weighed in. Says, if I know Aaron like I think I do, dude's out of here.
I mean, Favre knows Aaron he knows Aaron more than me. But here's what I know about Aaron: he doesn't talk to his family. If he's willing to not talk to his family, he's probably willing to leave the Packers.
I think that is the key, right? That this is a dude that holds a grudge and is prepared to cut off everything to just be right about that. So if he has decided that I am out of here unless various people in this building are fired, unless those people are getting fired, Rodgers is gone. Like he's bouncing. So to me, the question is now, all right, Rodgers isn't playing for the Packers anymore. Does he play anywhere else, or is he hosting Jeopardy? Now, I think I'm fascinated by this because I think the worst thing that could happen to Green Bay is that they trade Aaron Rodgers to Denver and watch him win 2 more championships while they suck and then retire. I think if you're Green Bay, there's a very real chance that they just aren't going to trade him. They're going to say, look, you're playing here,
I think
or you're
retirement's
leaving.
the worst thing.
I just don't. I think the worst thing that can happen is they let a franchise hero, leave and watch him win championships somewhere else. Particularly if they can't, for the first time in a long time, if they can't go from Hall of Famer to Hall of Famer as a quarterback. Like if Jordan Love comes in and Jordan Love is bad and Rodgers is busy winning championships in Denver, you look absurd.
They're like the Patriots, right? The Patriots had Drew Bledsoe and then Tom Brady from 1993 until 2019. The Packers have had Brett Favre. Was it 93 that he ended up there?
Yeah,
I think it was 93 or 92 or 93.
Drafted 92. It would have been 93.
So the Packers have had Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers from 1993 to 2020.
32 years. The interesting stat is, so they've had 3 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, right? Bart Starr, Brett Favre.
32 years.
What? They've both played 16 seasons.
Yeah, but Favre didn't play them all in Green Bay.
That's true. No, he did. 16 seasons in Green Bay. So this is the stat that I'm about to tell you, if you stop interrupting me.
That's been 27 years.
They went Bart Starr, they've Brett Favre, and Aaron Rodgers, and none of them have played longer than 16 seasons. They've all hit 16, and then 2 of them weren't there anymore, and the third one is now a question mark. Nobody played 17 seasons.
1993 was how long ago?
I'm just giving you the data. That's what I've read.
It's 27 years ago, though.
What do you want from me? That's what the
number. Because there's overlap. Because Rodgers and Favre were teammates. That's why it is.
So anyway,
don't do this live.
None of them played longer than 16 seasons.
Well, how about that? It's over. That's the cutoff. They're playing the analytics there, Sam. Nobody can do more than 16 years here in Green Bay. So the reports are, though, there are some reports that it's not Aaron versus the Packers. It's Aaron and Matt LaFleur, the head coach, against Goot.
Well, if you're the head coach, right, you're going to want Aaron Rodgers there, right? The head coach, Matt LaFleur, feels like the dude that's caught between, in the middle.
But there were reports
Mommy and Daddy are
year.
fighting, and I'm trying to keep the peace.
There were reports last year. LaFleur is from the Shanahan tree and the Kubiak deal and the whole. So there were reports that they like a nice system quarterback that they can control and they trust the system and the whole thing. And that was part of the reasoning for getting Jordan Love. They feel like they can work with anybody, not necessarily needing a star.
Yeah, but then Rodgers went and played like an MVP, and that changed everything.
Well, yeah,
that's the problem.
I don't know that it's true.
They had all these best laid plans a year ago, and then Rodgers went and played like the best quarterback in the NFL, and it's like, oh, every plan we had just went to hell. What are we going to do now? And it's like, oh, yeah, actually, I know we drafted your replacement last year, but you're our future. We want to commit to you long term. And he's like, well, yeah, but you screwed me over, and now I'm done with you, and I want out of here. Like, that's the fundamental problem is, again, it's mistakes you've made in the past. Like, the Packers decided, and honestly, there were reasons to, the decline that Rodgers had been in. The Packers decided it's time to start encouraging Rodgers towards the door, or at the very minimum, plan for his long-term succession. And Rodgers went, screw you, comes back, plays like an MVP, and now everything you just planned went to hell. This is like, it's Brett Favre. It's so freaking ridiculous how history is just repeating itself, right? They got tired of Brett Favre's crap, drafted his replacement, and then Brett Favre plays so well, it's like, well, we can't kick him to the curb now. And hangs on for years, and then eventually they just go, all right, look, to hell with this. We're not dealing with this every offseason. Leave. And Brett Favre goes to the Jets, then goes to the Vikings, blah, blah, blah. History's just repeating itself. They planned for Rodgers' replacement, and then Rodgers played so well that, oh, crap, we can't do that now. And you're screwed again.
The problem here is in 2008, Rodgers was on the team in 2005, 6, and 7, barely even playing. And the Packers probably saw him at practice and was like, we can move on from Brett Favre.
Right, but Favre was playing so well. But Favre was playing so well that they couldn't for a while. But eventually they just went, all right, now.
But in 07, they went to the NFC Championship. Yes, Brett Favre did throw a game-ending pick, which he tends to do in clutch situations after the 90s. And maybe that was what made it easier. But they watched Aaron Rodgers at practice and said, okay, we can move on. The Packers also got a year of Jordan Love sitting, probably barely even practicing. And I don't know how confident they are in Jordan Love.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had to touch on Aaron Rodgers. The other issue is Renner and our grades and rankings also don't love the Packers draft.
Yes.
With a C-. So ultimately, I agree. I don't think Rodgers is back with the Packers, which complicates all of this. But then you go and look, this stupid narrative out there, like, well, they didn't draft. They were going to draft an offensive player to make Aaron happy at 29. Like, no, that's not how you. It's not how you build a team. But they got Eric Stokes, a cornerback that we were a little bit lower on. He's got some production and straight line speed. He'll have a chance to compete for that cornerback spot opposite Jair Alexander.
Last year is the only season or the only draft where I think you can look at it and say they really didn't help Rodgers out. Now, people have been like
that one I completely agree with.
People have been like pulling out, their first round picks for the last 10 years, and it's like one offensive player or something, or one receiver, whatever it is, right? Like Rodgers has never been given help by the team. He's helped by pick 2 through 7, right? It's not like it's a one.
He's had one of the best offensive lines. He's got maybe the best receiver in the NFL,
and
Devontae Adams.
They're trying to build a team, not just a receiving core. Like Rodgers is helped out by having a great offensive line. He's helped out when the defense is good. So I don't think you can look at their drafting and say they haven't been helping Rodgers at all. I think you can look at last year and say they didn't help him for shit. They drafted his replacement and then a bunch of guys to complement a power running game. That didn't help anything. Like, A.J. Dillon showed up like for one game in December. It's like, well, what did that do? So I think you can look at last year and say that didn't help. And again, that's what happened. They burned this bridge a year ago, and now they're dealing with the consequences of you pissed off a dude that will ostracize his entire family if he thinks he's been wronged, and you think you can piece that back together in an offseason? Probably not happening.
And supposedly a lot of it's more contract-driven, not necessarily like, oh, you've given me bad players.
I think that's up in the air. Debatable.
I think the Jordan Love, that draft in general, absolutely with you. I'm sure Rodgers is in the running backs don't matter camp too. He's like, why are you getting this big dude in round 2?
Well, certainly not while we're like debating, A, you just drafted my replacement, and B, where are my wide receivers at?
Yeah, he was also like super high on Justin Jefferson, hoping he was going to fall, saw how great he was going to be in their system, and he goes to Minnesota, and then they trade up for a quarterback. Trade up to go get Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Trade it up. Who was taking Jordan Love that they had to – anyway.
It's bad.
Eric Stokes was 72 on our board. He goes 29th. Josh Myers, center prospect, he was 154 on our board, and he goes 62nd.
So the Eric Stokes one is interesting, right? Because I think Renner is lower on him than most other people. Certainly the Packers, obviously. So let's split the difference, right? Say he's not 72 overall. He's not 29 overall. He's probably worth 50. He was a guy that I thought was likely to go in the first round. But what's interesting is, even independent of like if you agree with the Packers and you think he's a first round player, he's a terrible fit for that scheme. Like he's not a player that gels in that defense. He's a guy that is more of a press man corner again, or a man coverage guy.
To be fair, it's a new defense. We don't know exactly.
But it's a new defense coming from a system that's very zone heavy.
That's
it's
the
not.
Rams,
it's not a press man scheme that they're bringing in unless it changes significantly from what we've seen. So Eric Stokes is not. It's like the J.C. Horn pick. It doesn't look great from a couple of different angles.
By the way, Stokes, people that have been with us for a while remember the Trey Waynes workout comparison.
Yeah.
There's a handful of corners through the years that have had lower 40 times than 20-yard shuttles.
We only discovered recently that Trey Waynes fixed his at his pro day.
I still like holding on to that narrative, though.
Well, no, it was great. It was perfect because it did perfectly encapsulate the kind of player he was. But apparently he went and fixed it at his pro day.
So a good corner shuttle time is probably about 4 flat, 4-1. You got a bunch of guys in the 3s. So if you're in the 4.36 range like Stokes, that is only 17th percentile. And so he's 4.34 40, 95th percentile. 4.36 shuttle, 17th percentile. And then you see it on film too. So when you have a guy that's like that, they don't change direction very well. They don't deal well with, routes that move in or out, in cuts, out cuts. And that's how Trey Waynes has been for a lot of his career.
Yeah.
So you look at that from a skill set standpoint and you see the size that Stokes brings and the speed, and you're like, okay, in a man-heavy system where you can press a little bit, you take away the speed receiver, and that's kind of your role. And I always thought Trey Waynes would be good at that in particular. So with a corner, it's just tough because when you can't move that well laterally, you're just a little limited. And Stokes is a better press man type of player than a zone player. And we'll see if it's an exact replica of the Rams offense. But yes, it is coming over
Defense.
Defense, right. Amari Rodgers is a decent pick. A lot of people making that Randall Cobb comparison. Either way, he's a good slot.
I like that pick.
He's a good slot receiver to add to the mix there for Jordan Love.
Yeah, and the Josh Myers, the center they grabbed from Ohio State, was another massive reach on our board. Never earned a PFF grade above 75 over a full season. And it's one of those players that when he loses, like it's bad. You know what I mean? Like he lunges at the line, misses, and then the dude is 7 yards in the backfield. It's like, yeah, my bad. Those, I think, are concerning players to be grabbing and hoping they can contribute.
I'll give you one guy to keep an eye on, Shamar Jean-Charles from Appalachian State. We've had a bunch of random, not toolsy corners that just go late. The Darius Williams of the world that you always mention. Darius Williams of the Rams had a great career at UAB from a production standpoint, but he's, okay size, okay everything else. But he's had a pretty good NFL career so far. And in that Rams system, Jean-Charles has similar, he's not the fastest guy, he's not the biggest guy, but he's had pretty good production at Appalachian State. And for a 5th round pick, he's got a shot there. But overall, didn't love the Packers draft. Scheme fits, where they got guys in the whole thing.
Yep.
And just not a great draft weekend overall for Packers fans because of
it's a catastrophic draft weekend overall when you consider that Rodgers now wants out of the building.
Their draft weekend is reminiscent of Reuben Foster's NFL Combine. And Reuben Foster barely got out of the interview room before he got sent home.
Yeah.
During the Combine.
Wasn't he waiting in the aisle for the medicals and then got into it with somebody?
Yeah.
Telling him where to go or something. And
what was
worse?
Home? I'm going to send Renner a text and see what he thinks. So is it worse, Packers draft weekend or Reuben Foster's Combine? What was worse?
Good question.
We'll see, though.
Yeah.
And that's back-to-back years. We'll see what happens here, but that's back-to-back years we didn't love the Packers draft. Last year they got literally no help from any of their draft picks. And so now they're going to need some of those guys to come good.
This is the thing.
Year.
Even if Rodgers comes back, so last year it was like, well, they did nothing to help this team. 13-3, they go 13-3 again, and honestly look like a more legit 13-3 because Rodgers made up all the difference by himself. Rodgers played as the best quarterback in the NFL, best season we've ever given him in terms of PFF grade. So it didn't matter that nobody else was coming in to help. Rodgers on his own made the giant leap between where the team could have been and where they actually ended up being. Rodgers probably isn't going to do that again, even if he plays again. Right?
Underrated part of this whole thing, yes.
So he's going to regress at some point.
Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and Jair probably all regress a little bit. They were all awesome.
So your three most important players are almost certainly going to regress, or at least a majority of them are going to regress, which means you have to rely on something else picking up that slack, and you haven't added anything that's going to pick up the slack, at least in terms of on paper this year with players at the top that are reaches, last year with players at the top that are a quarterback and not helping in terms of power running backs and tight ends. And it's just not where are you getting better?
I don't know. Tough time in Green Bay.
Yeah.
On paper, at least. We'll see what happens. The hits literally keep on coming from one boxing event to the next. They grow in excitement and anticipation. And this weekend is no different, with two of the sport's most respected fighters stepping into the ring Saturday night. There's no better place to get in on all the action than with DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. To celebrate this weekend's huge event, DraftKings Sportsbook is offering new users the opportunity to get 55-1 odds on either main event fighter to win this weekend's fight. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF when you sign up. For a limited time, all new users will change the spot on their page where they're reading. What? Where did this go?
Smooth.
Did it just disappear? Wow.
This is undermining your status as the terms and conditions guy. If you can't
Good thing redo the whole thing. So you download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF when you sign up. I said that, but for a limited time, all new users can bet $1 to win $55 on this weekend's main event. That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook is going all out for new users by offering them the chance to win $55 when placing a bet of $1 on this weekend's big fight. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. And of course, must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Salvaged it.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
Vikings.
Yes.
Sorry, Kelly wants to know if I want a Starbucks order.
I see. Have you got an actual lead into this Vikings thing, or we're just Vikings?
Vikings had one of the best moves of the entire draft. Now, we could debate Justin Fields and the merits of it. Maybe we save that for the offseason.
Well,
how it's going to reshape the entire NFC North forever.
Yeah, we can debate the merits of it later, but I think it's worth just articulating what was reported. That the Vikings were apparently essentially preparing to draft Justin Fields if he made it as far as their pick at number 14. They were also at least exploring phone calls of what it would take to get higher than that. And then ultimately the Bears jumped them and made the decision for them. At that point, you're now looking at what they were looking at. The offensive line, Christian Darrisaw. I mean, he was a player we've been saying every time we mocked it, Darrisaw went one spot ahead to the Chargers, who were always going to take a left tackle. They ended up getting Rashawn Slater. Suddenly Darrisaw's available. And if it was me, I would have rushed that card in.
Right.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. This is a dream draft for us. Vikings didn't do that. They traded down to 23 and still got Darrisaw. He ended up sliding, and they picked up a couple of third-round picks in addition to that. Whether they got lucky or whether they just played the odds, a masterful piece of drafting and maneuvering in the draft. This is, it's not even what we were talking about with the Raiders, who just don't take advantage of the extra value. They actually gambled effectively that, hey, look, we like Darrisaw, we don't love him, and we're willing to run the risk that somebody else grabs him and pick up a couple of picks and still grab him if he's there.
So what the Vikings actually got with that trade down, 2 third-rounders. They gave up a 4th-rounder. That got moved around a few times, but I just want to highlight the multiple picks. Darrisaw, potential starting left tackle at 23.
Not potential, actual.
The starting left tackle.
Immediate.
Potentially good. We don't know how good any of these guys are going to be. They also got Kellen Mond with pick 66.
Yep.
So you got a free lottery ticket on a backup quarterback who could be good and could be valuable or whatever. Any quarterback is valuable, despite when we trash quarterback picks. And then Wyatt Davis at pick 86, a pick that they also got from the Jets. It came through Seattle.
The number 1 guard on PFF's board.
The number 1 guard on our board. Well, Elijah Vera Tucker, because number 2 guard.
So number 2
Vera
guard.
Tucker could be either one. So the way I was laying this out was, even if, and Vera Tucker's the guy the Jets went and got, even if Vera Tucker is better than Wyatt Davis, maybe there's not a massive difference between both. Even if Darrisaw's not good at left tackle, you essentially got a starting guard in Wyatt Davis and not that big of a drop-off from Vera Tucker, and you took a shot at a tackle. Vice versa, you got a starting left tackle in Christian Darrisaw, and maybe Davis isn't that good at guard, but you took a shot at improving a position that has been a disaster in recent years. It is just, I think it's incredible team building for the Vikings to go in with a massive offensive line need. We knew they wanted a starting left tackle, and they come away with 2 potential starters plus a lottery ticket on a quarterback. That's awesome.
Absolutely. They got their starting left tackle, and in addition, they get an almost certain upgrade at guard. Regardless of how good Wyatt Davis ends up being, the Vikings had the worst guard situation in the NFL last year. Basically the 2 worst starters. Davis is almost certainly going to be better than one of those guys.
And they
got that essentially for free, right? And then the Kellen Mond pick, whatever it is in terms of a threat to Kirk Cousins, at the very minimum, it is the Vikings taking the backup job seriously for the first time since Kirk Cousins got there. They have been cycling through a bunch of guys that just don't belong on NFL rosters for the most part. For the first time, they've actually invested something significant in the backup quarterback spot. And whether that has any effect whatsoever, it's at least a signal that we're not just ignoring this. It's not your show, you being Kirk Cousins. It's not your show, and then if you suck, we're just screwed. We're looking at it now. And they apparently, called Kirk Cousins and gave him the heads up that, hey, look, we might be taking a quarterback this week. Which, by the way, is the kind of courtesy that the Packers don't appear to have given Aaron Rodgers, which might have gone some way towards heading off this shit show they've created. Like, you don't need like this. Everyone rails about it. You can't have a quarterback making your personnel decisions, man. Where does it end? Well, you don't need him making the decisions, but how about you give him a heads up before you draft a guy that might be taking his job? Like, it's just basic courtesy. You can head off your guy getting butthurt by saying, just a heads up, we might be taking a guy at your position this week.
Just a heads up, by the way. The Vikings come away with 11 players, and we preach drafting in volume a lot here. They come away with 11 players this year, 15 players last year. So there's a lot of spots on the depth chart that don't necessarily look great on paper, but if you factor in the fact that a lot of them are heading into their second year, a lot of them are rookies, there's a lot of unknowns, the Vikings could be the big sleeper here. And maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year, because a lot of times these drafts don't come to fruition until years 2, 3, 4. But last year, just coming out of a draft with 3 really good players is great. That's what you want. But when you draft 15 times, you have a better shot at that. Last year, we know they got Justin Jefferson. Jeff Gladney had shown flashes before. Now all of this off-field stuff occurred. Gladney was not as impressive as Cameron Dantzler, who they got in the 4th, but
Third, right?
Oh, was it 3rd?
I think so.
But you've got a first and you've got a wide receiver and a corner coming out of that draft, and a few other players. Even Ezra Cleveland could right now slated to be the right guard. If he's just a solid starter there, that's an incredible draft last year. And then you add in, do they get a left tackle and a left guard in this draft? It's a really nice 2 years for the Vikings, potentially, with all these lottery tickets that they've been purchasing.
They've done a really good job of fighting with their back up against the wall. Like, they have done the thing that we say you shouldn't do, which is leave yourself going into drafts needing to fill some pretty clear starting spots. And that just puts you in a really tough spot because you need to nail it. Otherwise, you're in real trouble. The Vikings have put themselves in that spot 2 years in a row, and at least on paper, appear to have done a really good job of fighting their way out of that corner. Last year, I think you could say they did. I mean, they got Justin Jefferson. That's pretty clearly a home run. Dantzler looks like he's going to be that answer at cornerback, even if Gladney bombs out because of this stuff. So that's a pretty good return. And then this year, Darisaw will start. Let's see how good he is. And then, again, you almost certainly upgraded a guard as well with a free pick. So they have come out of 2 straight drafts with a couple of starters that fill major areas of need, which is as well as you can possibly expect to draft in today's NFL.
Patrick Jones off the edge, another round 3 pick at Pittsburgh, had a pretty productive career, a lot of speed, and Keeney and Nwangu. I shouldn't have done that. From Iowa State. Cameron Bynum, cornerback out of Cal. Janarius Robinson, he's one of those ridiculously long edge defenders that you just get in the 4th round, never really productive, but if he puts it all together, fine. This is where we would bring Eric on here to argue with Vikings fans that Mike Zimmer is never. What do you have, like 2 Vikings fans in Vikings Twitter that are always arguing with you guys, and you think it's like the whole fan base? How does that work?
I haven't argued with them very much at all. But
Eric always has like 2 Vikings fans that he's arguing with or something.
It's a reasonable point, though, that they've essentially Mike Zimmer has effectively parlayed the idea that Donnell Hunter was the guy that was unproductive in college but a spectacular athlete into, the Vikings can just develop pass rushers or develop defensive linemen. And when you look at the players they've drafted, they really haven't. Like, it's been Donnell Hunter and basically that's it. But this draft it's let's just take a few of them. Let's see what happens, right? Maybe they'll all bomb. Maybe one of these 3 will work out and be a player that can start opposite Donnell Hunter or even replace him down the line. I don't hate that. Like, we've reached the point in the draft. There's no obvious starter on the edge, even in terms of a guy who we think we can develop into a great player. Let's just take 3 of them and hope that one of them shows something.
I'm trying to pull up my stats on Chaz Surratt. So he's their 3rd-round linebacker, former quarterback out of UNC. Renner and Austin on the 2-for-1 pod always joke about the hashtag fun to watch players. Chaz Surratt is hashtag fun to watch because historically, if I can get the actual numbers to load, I know going into last year, he was like 0th percentile run defense grade.
Yeah.
Dead last. But his run stop percentage historically was really high, 80th percentile, something like that. So he makes, here it is, over the last 2 years, run defense of 39.4 grade.
That's not great.
But his run stop percentage is 78th percentile. So he makes plays, but he also gets blocked a ton, misses a ton of tackles, and is always in the wrong gap. Yeah. My player comp for him is Bobby Boucher from The Waterboy.
Okay. All right.
I think it's a good one.
Their player comp for him was Telvin Smith, which
Renner's?
Yeah.
I fed Bobby Boucher to Renner, and the fact that he didn't put that
you?
in our draft guide is just egregious.
Yeah. Bobby
Boucher is perfect. He just runs around, goes and gets the ball. Every now and again, he runs into a tackle that blocks him, or he misses the tackle.
But Surratt's problem is he doesn't necessarily get the ball. He just runs around.
Well, he gets the ball at a high rate. That's the run
place.
stop percentage.
Yeah.
But a lot of times he doesn't have an idea that like there's a blocker in between him and the ball, and he gets blocked.
I mean, he's a classic, gamble. Let's take a gamble on a guy that's got high-end athleticism, flashes playmaking.
And a former QB.
Yeah, and a reason for not being great right now. You know what I mean? Like a reason for not being the finished article right now. And let's hope we can teach him the bits that are missing. And if we do, if he puts it all together, now we've got an awesome linebacker buried in the middle rounds. On the other hand, if he's just one of those guys who doesn't read things tremendously well and is constantly running around like a headless chicken and hitting the wrong gaps, then you just got a bad player.
Even in coverage, it's hilarious. His coverage grade is 15th percentile when compared to recent NFL prospects. But his forced incompletion percentage is one of the best. So he makes plays on the football. He's around the football.
Boom or bust.
But he's also just not great overall. The dead smack last run defense grade out of 130 recent NFL qualifiers.
Which is hard to do when you are high in run stop percentage.
Right.
Like,
That's
think
what
about
saying.
what that means you're doing all outside of those plays.
If you don't know the PFF system, if you're making a run stop in and around the line of scrimmage, you're probably getting a positive grade.
Yes.
And it's going to help your run defense grade.
And
if your
you're
run defense grade is that bad,
like ass,
it's
means
probably the 0th percentile, the 5th percentile missed tackle grade.
Missed tackles will do it, and also just running into the wrong gap will do it. Those will get you some pretty hefty negatives that will offset the stops you're making.
The other part is his pass rush grade is one of the best. So you just send him after the quarterback. You send him after the ball carrier. He makes plays on the ball in coverage, but he's just out of position or missing tackles all the time.
Yeah.
I love Chaz Surratt. Give me more Chaz Surratt. I just want to see him play football.
That feels like a guy that you want on special teams.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where you're like, run the hell down there for 60 yards and kill somebody.
Until he misses the tackle.
Well, whatever.
All right. Well, they got him 78th overall. He was 101 on our draft board, so it was fine. What did we give the Vikings for a grade? Did we grade that? We gave C- to the Vikings. I mean, the Packers. C- to the Packers. B+ for the Vikings.
There you go.
Good job by the Vikings. So a lot of players. I like the volume drafting. I love the trade down offensive line-wise.
Yep.
Big picture-wise, are they going to – last question, we're going to wrap it up here. Are they going to regret not making a bigger move for Justin Fields, who is now with their division rival Chicago Bears?
I was going to be like, but the first part of the report, when it was like, if he'd fallen to number 14, they would have grabbed him, but it hadn't yet mentioned the idea that they were exploring calls to trade. At that point, I was going to be sort of defending it and saying, look, they're tied to Kirk Cousins for another couple of years. The dude would be sitting for half of that contract. I don't hate the idea of like not prioritizing it and just saying, look, it is what it is. Kirk Cousins is here. If he falls into our laps, okay, that changes some things, but we're not going to go trading to go get him. But the fact that they were also looking, at least exploring what that would look like, says that, they were prepared to do that. At which point, I mean, if you think he's good enough that he's worth trading up for and you didn't do it, you have to question. Particularly if he goes to Chicago and lights the world on fire, and now you got to deal with that guy two times a year, every year, you might end up regretting that.
I need to make a list of these. There are just so many of these decisions that happen in the draft that are going to affect the NFL for years to come, and that's going to affect the NFC North for years to come.
Another thing the Vikings did, by the way, is snag like absurd athlete playmakers on offense. They got a couple of those guys. Nguanu, the Iowa State running back with almost no career production, but like absurd numbers, like ridiculous 40 time. Looks a lot more like Dalvin Cook than Alexander Madison does.
Yes.
At least in terms of an athletic profile, whereas actually they look quite similar because they both have dreadlocks and anyway. And then Emmitt Smith-Marset from Iowa, hitting the Iowa State hard with these athletes. Again, another guy that's just got crazy athleticism, built like a stick, like really rake thin, but made a ton of really big plays. Suddenly you're looking at that and saying, okay, the depth players we have, like we got
Backup
great starters.
Back, potential third wide receiver there.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look at their roster before, it's like we got great starters. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, albeit getting on, Dalvin Cook, But when we have to go to the bench, these guys are a lot more just sort of safe and steady, you know? We got BC Johnson. I mean, nobody's scared of that. Alexander Madison has been a good guy to fill in, but doesn't have the game-breaking ability that Dalvin Cook has. Suddenly you've added a guy to both those areas where they have like explosive playmaking ability if they see the field.
The YouTube chat is broken into some crypto discussion.
Oh, sweet.
And I think it's time to wrap it up. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Don't forget, get to Sam's Twitter account, PFF_Sam, if you want to see me pick out my hair with the afro. Add to the GoFundMe.
We're up to $776. I'm not sure where we got the weird number from.
Somebody just decided we're not going to end in a 0 or a 5 here.
Apparently.
With our donation. That's cool. Every dollar counts.
They do.
Do we accept Bitcoin or Doge in there?
Doesn't, not that I know of.
Oh, okay.
Look, I'm not in charge of the GoFundMe.
So I can throw some Doge at
I guess I am in charge of the GoFundMe, but I don't organize how they accept currency.
It's all going to a good cause. Heritage House over here in Cincinnati, helping men with addiction. So looking forward to picking my hair out probably next week at this time. I think we're gonna be on pace. We're gonna do it. I think we're gonna put our last episode on Monday morning. We'll be live. It'll be fake live. Monday morning. Sam will be camping in the woods of Kentucky, but we'll still be live on YouTube, and we'll be up there in podcast land. And then perhaps next Thursday, when you see both of us together again live, I might have a monster afro.
Yes. Is there like an outfit that goes with it, or are you just gonna like rock it like nothing's different?
No, I'll probably wear the same.
Just a regular top, and it's like you're just sitting there with a fro.
There will be no outfit that goes with it.
No outfit. That seems disappointing.
No, that's like another $1,000 if you want to start. If you want to start dressing.
Another $1,000, and we can dress Steve however we want.
In minor league baseball, Sam, we did have this one weekend. You picked a name out of a hat, and you got to dress.
Yeah.
For $20, you got to dress someone else on your team for the weekend. You had $20 to spend. We'd go to like the local Salvation Army, whatever.
I told you
pick an outfit for.
I told you my plan that I think we should do for a bet, right? One day I was scrolling through like the Macy's online catalog thing, right? And there's a couple of brands on Macy's where they just have like, who wears this? Who would buy this voluntarily and wear it?
Unironically?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was saying that we should do this. We should do a bet where instead of the loser having to buy the winner lunch, the loser has to wear something purchased by the winner from the Macy's online catalog, right? And, so you stick to the right size, right? I can't buy you like a small T-shirt or whatever because that would be harsh. But I just buy you this like absurd pink whatever, something ridiculous, and you have to wear that, or vice versa. I think that would be funny.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think we should do that.
We'll see. You got me to pick out my hair potentially, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but we're paying $1,000 for that. That's
for good causes. Good causes. Anyway, I'm
just saying
I'm paying $1,000 for it too.
This would
apparently
be just a bet. This would be just
Yeah, we'll see.
Like our lunch bets with
kind of like the
Grant.
lunch bets that we just off on the side. Anyway, that'll do it for the NFC South and the North. We've got the AFC South and the North still to come. Is that right? I'm losing track.
I've lost track.
I actually don't remember.
You tell
but it's
me
pre-recorded. So
this is why you just stick to the regular order.
You'll get it on Monday morning. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday, and then next Thursday, back to our 2 per week schedule, PFF NFL podcast. Wave, Sam.